Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome to today's Daf Yomi, which is YOMA Pei Gimel. We begin on the second line from the top. Mishnah tells us, in the case of Pikuach Nefesh, if we have an ill person whose life is in danger, you may feed him on Yom Kippur al pi bekin, based on the good advice of expert doctors. Amar Rabbi Yanai, suppose we have a contradiction. We have two opposing views. What do we do then? Chayla Aimer Tzarech. The ill person himself says, look, I'm desperate. I need to eat today, despite the fact that it's Yom Kippur. The doctor disagrees. He says, you can last till Ne'ilah. You'll be okay. So we have these two opposing views. The Chayla himself, who is advocating that we feed him, as opposed to the doctor who says it's unnecessary. What do? We listen to the Chayla. My timer. The pasuk says, "Leiv yedei amoras nafshay." The pasuk in Mishlei tells us that a person himself, in his heart, he understands his situation better than anybody else. Leiv yedei amoras nafshay, in which case his opinion carries the day, despite the fact that the doctor maintains that it's not necessary. Says the Gemara Pshita, of course, we would feed him in this case. We have two opposing views. It's a suffix. When we speak about suffix nafashis, a suffix involving a person's life, it's a life and death situation. Of course, you go lekula and you can feed him on Yom Kippur. Well, what's the chiddush of Rabbi Yanai? That we listen to the chayla, we feed him. Says the Gemara Ma'od Tema, perhaps I would think. Roifei kimlei tfei. Perhaps we'll say a doctor, his opinion has more value, and therefore we should listen to the doctor and not to the chayla kamash malon. The chiddush is no, despite the fact that there is an expert doctor with an opposing view. We listen to the chayla. We say, well, the chayla understands himself better than anybody else, and his opinion carries the day. What about the opposite case? Roifei Omer Tzarech. The doctor says, this fellow must eat today. It's Pekuach Nefesh. V'choyle Omer Einei Tzarech. The Chayla himself says, look, I could last till Ne'ilah. I don't need to eat. Once again, we go Lakula and Shoimin L'Roifei. We listen to the doctor and we feed him. My time, why? Why don't we say, well, the Chayla, he understands his situation better than the doctor, and he says he doesn't need to eat. Tunva hudenakitle. We assume that a tunva, she calls it a shtus, he's been gripped by some delirium, and he's not really up to determining whether he needs it or not. And therefore we go ahead and we listen to the doctor and we feed him. So when it's one against one, we go lekula and we always feed him. Whether it's the chayla saying yes, the doctor saying no, or the doctor saying yes, and the chayla refusing to eat, we go lekula and we feed him. Let's take a look at the Mishnah in view of this halacha. Tanan choyle machilin oisay al pi bekin. Mishnah tells us that we're going to feed a choyle on Yom Kippur based on bekin, advice of experts. So we have two kashas on Rabbi Yanai. Al pi bekin in al pi atzmei. It's pretty clear in the Mishnah. We're only going to feed him based on the expert advice of a doctor, but not based on his own accord. That's one kasha. Rabbi Yanai maintained that we'll even listen to the chayla in the face of the doctor's opposing view. That's one kasha. Mishnah says bekin. Number two, al pi bekin in. It appears that it's only if we have two doctors who are advocating achila here. Two doctors are like two edim. Some Farshim learn you don't need two kashra edim, but the fact that we have two, it's like two edim, and therefore we follow their good advice. But al pi baki echad loy, if we only have one expert, that's not sufficient to allow feeding this chayla. And this is not in line with Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai said even one doctor is enough to allow feeding. So we have two kashas. Number one, it can only be machal based on on the baki, not based on the chayla himself. Number two, one baki is not enough, you need two. Hachmai skinan, says the Gemara. You know what the Mishnah is speaking about? The Amar Leitzrichna. This fellow, this chayla says, I can last without food today. It's okay. In which case, the Mishnah is actually telling us a chiddush. That we listen to the Raifei. This is exactly like Rabbi Yehuda. If there's a chayla who'd like to eat, then we don't need a baki. He doesn't need to be supported by a doctor. As Rav Yana tells us, a chayla, even if he's being opposed by a doctor, we listen to the chayla because he understands the severity of his personal situation. The Mishnah is speaking where he refuses to eat. We listen to the doctor who tells us, yeah, this fellow needs to eat. So that's the case in the Mishnah. It's not a steer to Rabbi Yana. What do you mean, says the Gemara? But why would you need two doctors? Didn't Rabbi Yana tell us? When the chayla says, Eini tzarech, and the doctor says, tzarech, even if it's just one against one, we go lekula, we listen to the doctor. Safek nefashos lahakal. Why does the Mishnah speak about two bekiyin? And we need two doctors to advocate achila. Why can't we just feed him based on one baki? Why do you need two? Apparently, the Mishnah is speaking where number one, this ill person maintains that achila today is unnecessary, and he has somebody with him, another doctor supporting his position. The amalei tzarech. And therefore the Mishnah tells us, in this case, the only way you can feed him, the only way you're allowed to feed him, is if you have two doctors who are opposing these two fellows. So it's 2 against 2. It's a balanced equation, it's a suffix. And we go to kula and we allow him to eat. But otherwise, if it's just him himself, the chayla who says, Eini tzarech, even one doctor on the other side of the debate would be enough. Because as we said, 1 against 1, l'kula, we feed him. Here, that we need two doctors is a case where it's 2 against 2. The chayla has a doctor who's backing his position, who says, he can last without food today. There's no need to feed him. In this case, the only way that we can go ahead and feed him is we have 2 bekiyin who are advocating achila, because if it's only 1, then it's 1 saying yes, 2 saying no, 1 against 2 is batal. His opinion has no value. Says the Gemara, okay, so what is the chiddush of the Mishnah? In this case, when it's 2 against 2, we feed him. Pshita, of course. We have a balanced equation, 2 against 2. It's a suffix involving sakonas nefashis. The suffix nefashis lahakal. Certainly we went to go lekula. It's not a chiddush. Leitzricha apparently was speaking the ikka treyach rini b'adei. Now this chayla, who says Eini tzarech, has not only 1 doctor backing him, he has 2 doctors backing him. The amri tzarech. Here's the chiddush. Here we say, well, despite the fact that there are 3 people opposing the achila, since we have 2 bekiyin saying this fellow needs to eat, their value, their opinion carries and determines the halacha and allows us to feed him. So the Mishnah, which spoke about machil and oisi al pi bekiyin, 2 experts, is speaking where there are 3 people who are opposing the achila. The chayla and his 2 friends, despite the fact that there are 3 on this side. As long as you have 2 on the other side, 2 is like Adam, 2 is considered like 3. 2, 3, 4, up to 100, same thing. And therefore, we treat it like a balanced equation, like a suffix, and we are machil him based on the opinion of those 2 bekiyin. That's the chiddush. If it's only 2 against 2, it would be a chiddush. That's a simple suffix. You meant to go lekula in matters of pikuach nefesh. The chiddush is, even in a case where it's 2 that are opposed by 3 people, perhaps that's not really a fair, it's not a balanced equation. And wouldn't justify being machal this chayla. Yeah, chiddush is even in this case where it's a lopsided equation. It's enough of a suffix, so even if it's not 50-50, but there's enough of an uncertainty there, which allows us to feed him. And that's the chiddush of the Mishnah. Va'afagav the Amar of Safra Trei Kamei. Even though Rav Safra explained that the general klal, where Bezdin treats 2 Eidim like 100, Umei Ketrei and 100 like 2. Suppose 2 people come and say, well, Reuben killed Shimon. We have 100 on the other side saying, no, he didn't kill him. We don't consider the 100 more valuable than the 2. Because 2 Eidim, I believe, had the same nemanos, equal to 100. So, pi halacha, we don't give more value to 100 people than to 2. So even Rav Safra tells us that this formula, that Trey is considered like Meya, and Meya is considered like Trey, that's strictly Hanamila Linin Edis, as pertaining to offering testimony in Bezdin. So put in the context of Edis, halachically 2 are like 100 like 2. Avalinin Umdina. However, when it comes to estimations, evaluations, you're trying to determine the value of something that he was magdish and he wants to redeem it. In that case, we say, well, expert opinion is certainly swayed by numbers. Basar deus as lina. You have more people advocating a certain opinion regarding value, estimation. Well, the more the better. More perspectives, more opinion, more angles, different types of people, different types of approaches. That certainly has more value than the lesser group. So perhaps in this case, when you're trying to evaluate the need to eat on Yom Kippur, but the schayla is really in a critical situation which justifies achila, perhaps you should say, if there are 3 against 2, who wins? 3. And that's the chiddush of the Mishnah. No. The concept that the more the better, that's true only regarding monetary valuation. But in this case, where we're dealing with a potential life-threatening situation, we say, despite the fact that we have a lopsided equation, 3 advocating one opinion and 2 advocating the other, it's enough to present a suffix situation, and we say suffix nefashis lahak. That's the chiddush of our Mishnah. So again, let's just go back to Rabbi Yana, who tells us, whenever we have a suffix, if it's 1 against 1, regardless of whether the doctor is saying yes, the chayla is saying no, or the chayla is saying yes, the doctor is saying no, we go to kula and we feed him. Likewise, if it's 2 against 2, suffix nefashis lahak. If it's 1 against 2, of course 2 override the 1. But if it's 2 who are saying go and feed him, and 3 saying lo yitzarech, in this case as well, we perceive it as a suffix nefashis and we go l'kula. Says the Gemara, how can you say that the Mishnah is speaking where he opposes achila? The chayla maintains he doesn't need to eat. That was the way you explained the Mishnah. He says lo yitzarech, he has 2 others that support his position, in which case we need 2 bekiyin to determine that he needs. Take a look at the next part of the Mishnah. Mishnah says, if there are no experts available, then we follow his opinion. We feed him because there's nobody there to ask. The chayla says he needs to eat, go along with it. What does this sound like? It sounds like the entire Mishnah is speaking about a case where he'd like to eat. We assume that the entire Mishnah, from beginning to end, is speaking about the same case. The chayla claims he needs to eat. Says the Mishnah, look, if you can access a bucket, if you can find some experts to offer their opinion, you're meant to do so. If we have no experts available, fine. We're left with no choice, so We feed him based on his own good advice. But apparently, l'chatchila meant to access experts. And certainly, if there's an expert who says, Einay tzarich, you follow the expert's advice. Despite the fact that the chayla would like to eat. And this is a kashar biyanai, who says, we have a reifa saying no, and the chayla saying yes, we go l'kula. Who meant to learn the Mishnah as though it's missing some words, and this is how it's meant to be learned. The Mishnah is speaking about two different types of cases. First, the Mishnah speaks about a case where the chayla himself does not want to eat. I don't need to eat. He has two friends that support his position. Mishnah tells us, no. If we have two Bekiyim who are saying, yes, go ahead and eat, then their position determines. So that's the first part of the Mishnah, as we explained earlier. Then the Mishnah switches over and describes a different scenario. When is this halacha said? Which halacha? That two Bekiyim will determine the Amar Leitzarachani. That's only when the Chayil himself says, I don't need to eat. And he has two doctors who support his position. Well, since we have two doctors who are advocating yes, we follow their opinion. So that's the first part of the Mishnah. Aval, now the Mishnah switches to a different case. Aval Amar Tzarachani. But if the case is reversed, the Chayil says, I need to eat. As long as he's not opposed by two people, in which case he would be batal. Ein sham bekiyin trei. There are no two experts opposing him. Elachad damol itzarach. Only one expert saying he doesn't eat. So it's one against one. What's the halacha? Ma'achil nois api asmai. Certainly, you can feed him based on his claim, just as Rav Yani told us. If it's the chayla saying yes, we feed him despite the fact that we have a doctor on the other side saying no. But in the case where we have two against one, of course he's batal. If the chayla says, I need to eat, and there are two doctors saying, no, he don't need to eat, then we follow the doctor's opinion. Here it's not a true suffix, because he's only one. He doesn't have the value of two. And therefore, when there are two doctors opposing him, we follow their opinion. And that's the first approach in the Gemara. Marbar of Ashi Amar, he's going to take issue with this last detail. He says, yeah, it makes sense that one against two is batal. But if that single person happens to be the chayla, that's different. We treat it totally different. Because the chayla, he understands, he has intimate knowledge of his personal situation. He understands where he's holding better than anybody else. Therefore says, Mabra Vashi, if the chayla says, I need to eat, we feed him even though he's opposed by many people. Because the chayla knows better. Mabra Vashi Omar, Kol Heichad Omar Tzarechani. The chayla himself says, I need to eat. When you have 100 people on the other side saying, you don't need to eat, we listen to him, Shenemar, Leiv Yodei Amaris Nafshay. One's heart understands the bitterness. He understands how precarious his situation is. So Mar Rav Ashi takes issue with this one halacha, just this one thing. Generally speaking, yeah, one person can't measure up to two people. But if this one person happens to be the chayla himself, his opinion carries much greater weight and determines the halacha. Let's take a look at the Mishnah again. Tanan. If we have no experts available, then we feed him based on his das. He says he needs to eat, we feed him. Apparently, that's only because we have no doctors to ask. If we have doctors available, lie. You can't feed him based on his own opinion. So if he's one against two, we don't listen to him. It's a kasha, Mabra Vashi. Who says the chayla has extra special status? Says when Hachi ka'amar. You know the Mishnah meant to say as follows. Bamed dvar mamur. When do we access the doctors? The amar le'tzarechani. If the chayla claims he doesn't need to eat. So if he doesn't need, then he's not advocating achila. He's opposing the achila. Not only that, as we said, he had two doctors supporting his position. In this case, says the Mishnah, the only way to feed him is based on the expert advice of those Raifim on the other side of the argument, those two Bekim who are advocating achila. So in this case, we access the expert advice of the Bekim. Avol amar tzarechani. But suppose the Chayla himself says, I need to eat. What happens then? Ein sham Bekin klal. We don't reckon with a Bekin. We don't look at them. As Rashi says, Kaloimar ein Beki osam klum. Their knowledge, their expertise, worthless. As far as we're concerned, it's non-existent. Rather, we listen to him, we feed him. Why? The Chayil himself recognizes, appreciates his position, his situation more than anybody else. So in summary, we have a case where it's 1-1. It's a Safek HaShakal. Chayil says, I need. Rafa says, I don't need. We feed him. The same in the other case. Rafa says he needs. Chayil says he doesn't. We still feed him. If it's 1-2, then if it's one who says I need, and two who say you don't, let's say it's the Rafa saying yes, and Chayil and his friend are saying no, we don't feed him because the Echad is batal to the Shnai. What about a case where the Echad happens to be the Chayil? He says, yeah, I need. And we have two who say you don't. Now we have machlokes. According to the first approach in the Gemara, we don't feed him because the Chayil is batal. He's 1-2. Ma'abar Rashi says, no, a Chayil, he carries greater weight. He understands. He knows. And even if it's 1-2, we follow his advice and we feed him. If it's 2-3, 2 say yeah, 3 say no. Gemara tells us, even though it's a lopsided equation, it's still considered Safek Nefashos, and we'll go L'Kula and we feed him. Continues the Mishnah, Misha Achaz a bulmus, one who was gripped with a bulmus condition. It's a Sakaras Nefashos due to severe malnutrition. Here as well, we feed him. We feed him machil oisei afil dvarim tmeim. We'll feed him even non-kosher items. So not only do we feed this fellow on Yom Kippur, we will feed him even something which is not kosher, which is really worse off than just feeding him kosher food on Yom Kippur. So it's Hakanas Nefashos, and it overrides all these Yisurim. We feed him achi yoiru einav until his eyes light up again, until his complexion returns, and we know that he's out of danger. Mishan is shachay kelev shoyte. One who was bit by a deranged dog. The Gemara tells us this dog has kisha, has rachra, so this fellow's life is in danger. Apparently there was some sort of alleged remedy which will involve feeding the stricken person the chatzar kavod, something to do some portion of the liver, connected to the liver of that dog that bit him. Says the Tanakama, that remedy hasn't really proven itself. It's not really a substantiated remedy, and doesn't justify feeding this fellow something which is not kosher. Rabbi Masya ben Charash Matir, he allows it. He considers it a proper remedy. V'oidamar Rabbi Masya ben Charash, in addition, he said, ha'choshesh begroinoi. Some of the Gerus say choshesh bepiv. He has some sort of severe ailment in his throat or in his mouth. Matil noisamtich b'Shabbos. We can apply medicine to this fellow even on Shabbos. V'pnei shu safek nefashos. We're dealing with a safek koch nefesh v'chol safek nefashos doiches haShabbos. Concludes the Mishnah. Even if the safek is just a slight safek, Mishnah nafla olav ha'polos. Somebody's walking along and he was buried under a pile of rubble. Safek Usham, Safek Enisham. There's an uncertainty as to whether this fellow is even there. Somebody noticed him walking by, but it's not really sure whether he got stuck under the rubble. So that's one shayla. Is he there or not? Now, even if he happens to be under that rubble, Safek Chai, Safek Meis, don't really know whether he's still alive or not. That's another Safek. Safek Kuti, Safek Yisrael. You know what? We don't even know if this fellow is a Yisrael. Despite the fact we have 3 reasons to avoid the situation. 3 sfeikas whether we should even get involved. All of us agal, we proceed to move away the rubble despite the fact that it involves a malacha. And what happens? If he's discovered to be alive, they uncover part and they say, well, he's still breathing. They continue removing that rubble. If they notice that he's mace, they leave him in place. Continues the Gemara. This fellow who's experiencing a bumus condition, he's allowed to be fed anything to get him back on his feet. And the Mishnah says, until his eyes light up again. As she says, this fellow's eyes dim. So when he appears like he's come back to himself, that's the simon to stop feeding. How do we know? How do we know that he's back to himself, that his light, that his eyes are lit up again? The way to determine is to see whether he can discern between good and bad. When it comes to flavor and taste, this fellow is sharp enough to discern whether this food is good or spoiled, and that's a simon that he's back to himself. One who's experiencing this bomus condition, although we may feed him something which is not kosher, but we want to minimize the damage. Have a choice between a more severe isser or a less severe isser. Try to feed him the less severe isser. For instance, you have a choice between tevel, which involves misa, or nevela, or just a nevela which is a lav. Of course, machil might say nevela. You give him nevela. Give him the more lenient isser rather than the more severe one. So the heter to feed him does not justify giving him anything, even to minimize the damage. You have a choice between tevel or shvius. You give him something where trumas and have not been removed, or shvius, which Rashi says is shvius fruit after the zman habir, after a point in time, in which case you're no longer allowed to keep it at home. It's no longer available for the animals in the forest, and it's usher at this point, and the isser is an asay. You're meant to get rid of it, you're not meant to hold on to it. So it's a asay. In this case, you feed him shvius, which is a more lenient isser than tevel, which is misi ve'eshemayim. Let's say you have a choice between tevel or truma. This is a real dilemma, because both tevel and truma generate misa. Tanoi, machlokes tanoi. What about if you have shvius or nevela? So Taisu Rosh says that you give him shvius because shvius is only Ayvar and Mitzvah Hasei, and nevela is a Leis Hasei. What about tevel or truma, where both are pretty much of equal severity? Both are misa. Tanayu or machlokes tanaim, which way to go? This time, machil noisay tevel, ve'ein machil noisay truma. You have a choice between tevel and truma. You give him tevel, not truma. Ben tema imer truma v'lei tevel. You prefer truma over tevel. The Gemara soon explain the pshat, the reason of the machlokes. Amar Rabbi, first you meant to know like this. Heicha de efsha b'chulim. Well, Rashi explains as follows. Let's say you have 10 pounds of oranges, and this fellow only needs 9 pounds, meaning you can go ahead and take the 10 pounds of tevel and separate the truma maser. It'll still be enough to feed this person back to health. Of course, in that case, if there's enough in the chulin aspect of the tevel here, the kuli amalei pligi the masakninenlei or masfinenlei, all agree. You don't even sack in that tevel. transform the tevel into chulin by separating tumah and maser. Umasfingla, you give him the rest. There's no question. Don't leave it in a tevel state and just feed him. If you can do without. Ki pligi. When then does machlokes apply? B'delay efsha b'chulin. When there isn't enough within the chulin portion of this mix to supply this sick fellow's needs. So we're faced with a dilemma. Do we feed him the entire supply, entire 10 pounds, in its tevel state, or do we separate the truma and feed him the truma with the rest? What's worse off, truma or tevel? Marsar or tevel chomer. Tevel is worse off, and therefore go ahead, separate the truma, and then give him that truma with the rest of the chulin. Marsar or truma chomer. Other shita maintains truma is worse off. Just leave it as is and feed him the entire supply in its tevel state. Interesting, despite the fact that he's giving him more isser. 10 pounds of tevel, that's better than giving him even 1 pound of truma. Apparently the qualitative edge that truma has over tevel overrides the fact that quantitatively he's being fed more isser because it's a more lenient isser of tevel. Now, what is the rationale behind this machlokes? Ma'asav tevel chomer, aval truma chazir l'koyin. Tevel is more chomer than truma, which is a limited isser. Kohen could eat truma, but he cannot eat tevel. Even if a kohen has his own supply of tevel, he can't eat it as is. He has to separate the truma. He can eat the truma, but he can't eat it in its tevel state. So tevel is more chomer. Keep away from tevel. Umar savar truma chomer. The other shita maintains truma is more chomer, avot tevel efshel tukune, as opposed to tevel, which is not a permanent phenomenon. It could be a second tevel. So better give him truma, better give him tevel than truma. So in short, we have a fellow whose life is in danger. We give him anything he needs to eat, but we prefer hakal. We go to the more lenient isser first. Shvius over nevela, nevela over tevel, tevel and truma. We have a machlokes. Now, Rabbi told us, efshe b'chulin, if there's enough here which would allow us to first separate the truma and feed him the rest, you meant to do so. Well, pshita, of course. What's the chiddush? L'tzricha b'Shabbos. We're speaking that it's Shabbos, where it's also to be mafresh truma maser. And the chiddush is, go ahead, be mafresh the truma maser, rather than giving him the tevel. Well, b'Shabbos nami pshita. Even if it's Shabbos, it's pashat tiltum d'Rabbanan. At worst, what is he doing? And this is the Rabbanan. Rabbi Kivega on the Gilin Hashas has a kasha on the lashon tiltum, which sounds like it's Isser Muktzah. Although elsewhere this Isser is presented differently. It's because of Masakin, it's like fixing, it's like fashioning, creating something. In any case, at worst case, it's Isser D'Rabbanan, of course. He meant to do so as opposed to giving him the tevel, which is Asam D'Araisa. Hacham Ma'askinan, you know what we're speaking about? Where it's only tevel midrabanan to begin with. Ba'atzitz, it grew in a flower pot chain in Nakav, which had no puncture. It was an unperforated flower pot, in which case it's detached from the ground with rabbanan. So the whole chiv of tevel, of trumas and mas, is only rabbanan. Says Rabbah, even though on either side of the equation you have a potential isad rabbanan, giving it to him as is rabbanan. Being mafresh the truma on Shabbos, isad rabbanan. Which way should we go? Go be mafresh. Separate the truma. Cancel the tevel status. Why? Explains Rashi, because although in this particular circumstance there really isn't any advantage, there's no mila to doing the afrasha, which is Isra Rabban, as opposed to feeding in the tevel, which is Rabban. But you know what might happen? The casual observer watching us, avoiding afrasha's truma, and rather giving him the tevel in a tevel state, might go ahead and next time around actually feed the choila tevel min ha'Torah. Right? Next time it might be true tevel, and then it's a real problem. He's going to avoid hafrasha, just as he observed last time. I'll feed it to him in its tevel state. He'll think, well, that's the way it's meant to be done. Therefore, we try to avoid that confusion, and says Rabbi, even though it's Shabbos, and you're faced with an equal choice, you have a dilemma, you have a Isra Rabban here, Isra Rabban here, go ahead and be mafresh the truma, and give him the chulin. So that's if it's feasible. Meaning if the chulin portion is enough to supply his needs. But in a case where it's not enough, and you're faced with a choice of tevel or truma, we have that machlokes marsav a tevel chamor. We prefer giving him truma as opposed to tevel, or marsav a truma chamura. Given tevel as opposed to truma, which is mocham. Now getting back to Rabbah for a moment. Lema Tanoi, Rabbah says that even on Shabbos, we're doicha the shvus of afashas truma in light of the Isser tevel. Even though it's only Isser tevel with Rabbanan, we go ahead and we tell him to be mafish the truma, which involves Isser Rabbanan, rather than feeding him tevel the Rabbanan, which might lead to worse Yisurim in the future. Lema Tanoi, perhaps this shaila, this halacha of Rabbah, is actually a machlekes Tanaim desanya misha nechashachay nachash. One who was bit by a snake on Shabbos. Currently, roifei makam l'makam. You can travel to a different place to summon a doctor. Umakaran leisat tarnagus. They can tear open a tarnagus, which is then placed on the wound. V'goizen leisat creation. They can pick leek off the ground, even on Shabbos machilais, and feed him. Ve'ein tzarich la'asa divrei Rabbi. Rabbi says there's no need to take off masa. Here's another example of tevel d'Rabbanan. It's a york, a vegetable. In Torah, tevel is only grain, grapes, olives. Here we're speaking about vegetables. Tevel d'Rabbanan. Says Rabbi, just feed it to him as is, in its tevel state, rather than having to look after the ma'aser. There's no need to maser this thing. Rabbi Lezer Shimon, I mean, no. Go ahead and separate the truma and the maser. Don't feed him, even tevel d'Rabbanan, which might lead to confusion. It might lead to this fellow being fed tevel d'oraisa next time. Lo yachlat she'aser. He shouldn't eat until you take off the maser. Neymar Rabbi Lezer Shimoni, v'lo Rabbi. Shall we propose that Rabbah, who tells us to separate the truma in this case, is in line with Rabbi Lezer Shimon and not Rabbi, who does not require hafrasha in this case, who's not concerned about confusion? Just leave it as is. There's no need to look after the maser, because in either case you're doing an Issa D'Rabbanan. Afilu Tema Rebbe. You know what? Rabbah can be in line either with Shitas Rebbe. Why? Kan like Amar Rebbe Hassam. It's only over there. Where Rebbe maintains there's no need to look after the maser. Why? Ela Inyan Maser Yorek D'Rabbanan. We're speaking about maser pertaining to vegetables, which is only D'Rabbanan, which could never ever come to Issa D'Oraisa. A vegetable planted wherever, in the ground, in a flower pot, is at most only tevel midrabanan. So it can never actually lead to tevel midrabanan. Therefore, Rabbi says, forget about it. You don't have to worry about the tumas and masers. Either way, you're doing an Issa D'Rabbanan. Separating Truma and Shabbos, Issa D'Rabbanan. Giving him the Yerek, tevel is D'Rabbanan. Just you can leave it as is. Aval b'masa dagon. But if we're speaking about ma'aser pertaining to grain, the tevel d'oraisu, which generally is minat Torah. So even though here we're actually speaking about grain, which is only asar midrabanan because it was planted in an otzis shein enoch of an unperforated flower pot. But since theoretically this species, this type, this variety can have with it an issa d'oraisa, should it be planted in the ground? In this case, I feel Rabbi Moida, even Rabbi would agree. Don't give him the tevel midrabanan. Be ma'afish the truma. Do this in the rabbanan. In that manner. Why? The isharasle ba'atashen and nakav. Because if you allow him to be fed this tevel midrabanan, a grain which happened to grow in an atashen and nakav, in an unperforated flower pot, you know what might happen? Next time around, they might feed him grain which grew in the ground in its tevel state rather than separating tumas and masras. He might come to eat the tevel, this grain, this tavua, which grew in a atzitz, in a flower pot which was nakav, which was perforated, in which case it's chayiv, but tumas and masras minat Torah. So even Rebbe would agree in this case. Since this type of material, this type of substance can theoretically have chiv tevel min haTorah, the correct approach is to separate Truma Masra and then feed it to him. So in summary, we spoke about a fellow whose life is in danger. We feed him even at Dvar Isser. We go for the more lenient Hakal Hakal. We prefer Shvius, which is only Isser Essay, over Nevela, which is Leis Essay, and Nevela over Tevel Truma, which involve Misa. What about if we have an equal choice between Tevel and Truma, which are both Misa? Tanakama says, go with the Tevel. It's something which could be Nesakin, it's not so Chamer like Truma. Ben Tema maintains, go with the Truma, which is not an all-encompassing Isser. In fact, it's Roy Lakain. So prefer feeding him Truma over Tevel. What about feeding him Tevel D'Rabbanan on Shabbos? So if it's a case of Yerek, Tevel is vegetables, in which case the entire species here cannot conceivably be Asr Menater. There is no Chiv of Truma Masr on Yerek ever Menater. So now which way do we go? We feed it to him as is a D'Rabbanan, or are we meant to be Mafresh, the Truma Masr, which is also Issa D'Rabbanan? What is preferred? Rav Lezer Rishima says you're Mafresh it. Why? Because otherwise in the future, down the line, somebody might follow through even when it comes to Tevel D'Oraisa and feed it to him as is rather than separating the Truma Masa, which is certainly not the way to go. Therefore, Lezer says, even if it's Tevel D'Rabbanan, be Mafresh it and feed him Chulin. Rabbi says there's no need to be Mafresh. And the Gemara concludes that's only because it's Yarek, in which case this type of variety will never ever come to Tevel D'Oraisa. So if you're faced with an equal choice, on either side you have a potential Issa D'Rabbanan. Feeding him, Issa D'Rabbanan. Being Mafresh on Shabbos, Issa D'Rabbanan. You could just leave it as is. But all seem to agree that if what grew in this flower pot, in this Otzitz, She'eninakiv, was actually Dagon, grain which can potentially have within it a din Truma Min HaTorah, in that case, even if it's on Shabbos, go ahead and be Mafresh, the Truma Meiser. So speaking, where it actually grew in an unprepared flower pot, and it's only Tevel D'Rabbanan, so feeding him is D'Rabbanan, be Mafresh, the Truma is D'Rabbanan, so it appears like an equal choice. Says the Gemara, no. Be Mafresh the Truma. Do that Isra D'Rabbanan, rather than feeding him the grain which is now Tevel D'Rabbanan, because it might lead in the future to a situation where he'll be fed Tevel Min HaTorah, in which case, like in a case where the grain grew in the ground. So rather than feeding the Tevel D'Rabbanan, be Mafresh the Truma, and feed it him as Chulin. Taner Rabbanan Mishachazei Bumas, one who's gripped with this Bumas state, his life is in danger due to malnutrition. Machil Oisei Dvash, V'chol Mina Mesika, we treat him to honey and all types of sweets. Shadvash V'chol Mina Mesika. These things are Me'irin Ma'or Enav Shaladam. They restore one's eyesight, one's complexion. They bring him back to himself. Even though we don't have an absolute riot to this concept, we have some sort of indicator. This is a pasuk by Yohanan, who was famished, and he says, look, Ru'u na, take a look, my eyes are glistening again. Because I tasted this honey. Says the Gemara, why is this not a real raya? It's pretty clear that Dvash revived him. The Hasam lav bumas achsev, because actually he didn't have a bumas state. He was he was malnourished, he was famished, but it wasn't actually bumas. So it's not a clear raya that Dvash has that effect on a bumas fellow. Feeding him sweets is only preferred after he ate a proper meal. But prior to eating, it's worse off. It actually draws the appetite. It will make him even more hungry. They found this Ish Mitzri, who was severely malnourished. They brought him to David HaMelech. They offered him some bread and he ate. They gave him water to drink. After he finished the main meal, they gave him some dessert. A fig, some raisins. His spirit returned. He He hadn't eaten or drunk. Shloisha yom shloisha leilos, for 3 days and 3 nights. In any case, we see dessert is meant to follow them. Amar of Nachman Amar Shmuel. Misha achsei bumus. One who is experiencing a bumus condition. Machil oisei alya b'dvash. They feed him fatty meat. Alya is the tail of the animal, but dvash dipped in honey. Rav Huna bar Yeshua Amar. This also works. Av solos nekiya b'dvash. Likewise, refined flour mixed with honey. Rav Papa Amar. This also afilu kimche desari, even barley flour, bedivsha mixed with honey. Amar b'yechna pam achas achaz di bumus. I was once experiencing bumus, and I hurried over to the eastern side of the fig tree to find the sweet fruit. And I fulfilled on myself the pasuk which says, wisdom keeps its owner alive. I knew where to find those sweet figs. The Tanur of Yosef, haroitza litaim tam teina. If one really wants to experience the true sweetness of a fig tree, where should he go? Yifnei l'mizrach. Should approach the eastern side, which faces the sun. Shnamar umi megad. Where do we find sweet things? Tvois shamish, things produced by the sun. The sun goes ahead and ripens it properly, and that's where you find sweet figs. Says the more, there was a story involving Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef. They were traveling along, traveling on the road. Achsi bumus, Rabbi Yehuda. Suddenly Rabbi Yehuda was experiencing bumus. His life was in danger. He needed to eat as soon as possible. They met this shepherd who's holding a loaf of bread. Rabbi Yehuda snatched the bread from the shepherd. And he ate his bread. It was pikuach nefesh. Of course, he was going to compensate him, but he was able to do so because of pikuach nefesh. Rabbi Yosef turns to him and says, "Look what you did. Kipachta saraya. You were mafsid the raya." The fact that Hashem brought you to this situation perhaps is indicative of some deficiency that you have. You must do tshuva. Now, kimatu lamasa. Once they arrived in town, it was Rabbi Yosef's turn. Rabbi Yosef experienced bumas. But since he was around people, he had no problem. Adru, everybody came running and surrounded him. Belagi, v'tzoi, containers with sweets, v'tzoi with various foods. Rabbi Yehuda turns to him and he says, "Look at the difference. Ani kipachta saraya. Sure, I was mafsid, only one person, a shepherd. Look what you did. Vato kipachta asayir kula. You were mafsid the entire city, came running with their food." Another story, Vesur Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi. Havu ka'azli v'urcha, all three were traveling on the road. Rabbi Meir have a daik b'shma. Rabbi Meir had a practice as follows. He would pay close attention to a name. Name, Shem, denotes essence, mahus. You know, the slight ruach HaKodesh that parents experience upon naming their child is based on the true character of the child. It's reflective of his nature. Rabbi would pay close attention to names, especially when it came to being hosted by somebody. The name of the person, which was reflective of his character, would be the criterion upon which to determine whether he's trustworthy or not. That was Rabbi Meir's approach. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, however, they wouldn't have this minhag of being medayik in a person's name. So all three were traveling. When they arrived at this town, they were looking for some sort of hotel. Yahavalu, they asked around, and people showed them to this host. They asked him, "What's your name?" Amalu Kedar. My name is Kedar. Didn't sound like to Rabbi Meir. Amar, he says, "Look, Shmamina Adam Rashu. It appears to me this fellow is a wicked fellow. Shenema Kedoir Tapuchas Hema. This is a nation, a flippant nation. So Kedar is not really a good sign, and he's not meant to be trusted." So what happened? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Ashlim Lekisai. Rabbi Yossi trusted him, and they handed him, this was for Shabbos, they handed him their money pouch for safekeeping over Shabbos. But Rabbi Meir, he didn't like the sound of this guy. He didn't hand his kiss to this fellow. Rather, he hid it in the Beis HaKvaros. Azal oisvei beikivre, he put it near the kaver, the avua of this host's father. It so happens that that's where he placed it. is chazili b'chelme. Apparently his father, like son, all the way from Oil Mehemes, was looking after his son, and he revealed himself in a dream to his son, the host of Reb Meir. This was Friday night. He says, listen, I got something for you. Come, shakal kisa, take the pouch, the manach, which is lying aresha, near the head, the ogav of this fellow, referring to himself. Go to my kever, you'll find the money pouch. So this is what this fellow was dreaming Friday night. Lamacha, the next morning, Amalu, the host, approached his guests. He wanted to see if there's some sort of truth to it. Amalu, hachi is chazili b'chalmai. This is what I saw in my dream. And he was observing their reaction to see whether they'll respond accordingly, whether there's some truth to it. So Reb Meir held his ground. He didn't show any outward appearance of nervousness. He didn't react at all. Amrlei, so they told him, you know, a dream that a person has Friday night when he's relaxed, in a good mood, that's not something to be reckoned with. It's just a figment of imagination. Don't pay attention to it. So Reb Meir quickly went over to the Beis HaKvaros, v'natri kol YOMA. He stood there watching it the entire day. But to Shabbos, he took it v'aisei. Now, the next morning, Lamachar, the next day, Amruloi, Rabbi Yehuda turned to the host and he said, Havlon kisan, what's with our pouch? Could you return it? Amrulu, he flatly denied. Lo yoyud var mailam. Never happened. What pouch? Where pouch? Amrulu Reb Meir turns to them and he says, look, why? Why did you pay attention to this person's name? You could have realized he's not to be trusted. So they responded to him, well, why didn't you tell us that he's not to be trusted? So he's responded, he says, look, Amar de Amriano Chashasha. You know, I had a hunch. I had a suspicion. Achsuki mi Amri. Was I certain? I couldn't establish it as a fact, so I didn't propagate it. I just took my hunch and followed through, but I wasn't going to advertise it. In any case, they were trying to get their money back. So what did they do? Mashchu va'elu l'chanusa. They convinced him to come along into this bar. They gave him to drink. This would get him out of the way. Chazu tzlafchi. They noticed remnants of lentils. Apparently he had eaten lentils for lunch or whatever. Asfami on his mustache. So they quickly took that and they ran to his wife. Ozlu, they ran to his wife. V'yavu siman al dvisu. And they provided it as a sign, as a code word to his wife. Your husband told us that you should give us back our pouches. In fact, we have a code word. Didn't you have lentils for lunch? Okay. So she fell for it, and v'shaklu l'kisai, they took their pouches back. V'aisu, and they left. This fellow came back home. You gave them their pouches back? Ozal, he came back, v'katli itze, and he killed his wife. I knew this none. This is what's described in the following Mishnah Brisa. Ma'im rishonim hechilu basar chazir. It so happens that as a result of neglecting ma'im, washing one's hands before eating, it brought about a tremendous mechshol. The person was fed chazir. Rashi brings that there was a story of a restaurateur that he had non-Jewish guests who he would feed chazir, and Jewish guests who he would feed kosher food. So if he saw a fellow washing his hands, must have been Jewish, he fed him kosher. A fellow came in one day, didn't wash his hands. He gave him to eat chazir. So neglecting ma'im rishonim resulted in chazir. Ma'im achronim, neglecting to wash ma'im achronim after the meal, such as this fellow, had he have washed his hands, which also includes, generally you also wipe your mouth, he would have wiped away these lentils. So neglecting ma'im achronim, horgus hanefesh, brought about that his wife was killed. So this was one story. At the end of the day, later on, they learned a lesson of Yehuda Rabbi Yossi, and they started paying attention to people's names. When they came to the next house, the Shmei Bala, whose host's name was Bala, they said, this is doesn't sound right. They didn't go in there. Amri, they said, Shema mina rashu. Apparently this fellow is a wicked person. So we see that Bala is associated with Chet. This time, they kept away. we're trying to cover today's basic points. We learned that even on Yom Kippur we feed a chayla due to sakanas nefashos, even when it's only a suffix. For instance, the chayla says, I need to eat. Raifa says no, we feed him anyway. Raifa says yes, the chayla says no, we feed him. There's one Raifa who says yes, opposed by two who say no. The one is batal, we don't feed him. What if that single person happens to be the chayla himself? First portion the Gemara maintains, we don't feed him. Rav Ashi says, a chayla? He understands his situation better than everybody else, and therefore we feed him even in this case. When two doctors say yes, and three say no, even though it's a lopsided arrangement, we consider it a suffix and we feed him. In such a situation, we try to opt for the least amount of Isser. And the Gemara learned that even if it's only Tevum D'Rabbanan, we're meant to separate Truma and Maser even on Shabbos, in order to avoid an Isser D'Oraisa in the future. A person with bumas is meant to be fed properly, and then afterwards given some dessert. And we learned about the importance of paying attention to one's name. Kol tiv tiyonat slacharav.